Decoded.
Welcome to Book Decoded, your shortcut to some really fascinating insights. Today we're diving into Marcin Dabrowski's brand new book. It's called 10 Rules for Impossible Projects. Surprising but true advice on how to successfully deliver difficult and complex projects, just out in 2025. So, okay, let's jump right in. Have you ever been handed a project that just felt, completely doomed from the start, like the timeline is just fiction, or the scope keeps shifting around? Maybe the contract looks like it was written by someone who, frankly, never planned on actually delivering it. Well, this book, it isn't your typical cheerful guide to project utopia. Dabrowski calls it a survival manual for the trenches.
Okay.
And our deep dive today, it's going to uncover some really surprising, maybe even counterintuitive truths about finding success when, well, everything seems stacked against you.
It really is a different take. The book focuses on what it labels impossible projects. And these aren't just, difficult. Dabrowski says they're literally set up to fail from day one.
Wow. Set up to fail. Okay.
Yeah. We're talking things like completely unrealistic timelines that were baked into the contract from the beginning, or maybe a scope that's just way too general, undefined, or improperly defined. That leads to what he calls exploding scope, where the requirements just keep piling up way beyond what anyone agreed to.
Oh, I can picture that. Scope creep on steroids.
Exactly. And then add things like too low revenue, so you're losing money, lacking resources, not enough people or budget, maybe even a hostile attitude on the client side. Oh, and improperly written contracts. It's like the perfect storm for failure.
That sounds incredibly stressful, just hearing the list. So the author makes this point that in these kinds of extreme cases, he says no project management method will be helpful because the real problems have nothing to do with the method applied. So if the usual rules don't work, what does that mean?
Right. That's a really critical point. Your standard project management methods, they're great tools, don't get me wrong, but they're built for what you might call healthy projects. Ones with a solid foundation. Dabrowski argues they simply don't solve the problems of impossible projects. They don't really prepare you for that relentless, constant client pressure to deliver more and better, or maybe even worse, those astonishing, destructive, and unpredictable decisions made by the client that can just completely sink everything.
Okay, so if the methods have limits here, what about certifications? The PMP, Prince2, all that. Do they actually equip you for these kinds of impossible, messy situations? What's missing?
Yeah, he's pretty blunt about that. He basically says certifications might teach you how to answer test questions, which is fine, but they often fall short on the practical knowledge you actually need to navigate these really intense, politically charged settings, or when the very definition of success keeps shifting because the demands are just fundamentally unrealistic.
So it's about handling the chaos, not just the theory.
Precisely. It's about surviving the messy reality, not, acing the exam.
But here's what really grabbed me. Despite sounding utterly doomed to fail, the book argues these impossible projects can actually be delivered, and delivered to the client's satisfaction even. And this is where it gets interesting, right? It's not about sticking to the theory. It's about finding strategies that actually work when theory fails and best practices pack up and leave. So what makes these rules counterintuitive?
Well, the whole idea is shifting to a totally different mindset. It means adopting rules that are pragmatic and at times counterintuitive. So take the first rule he mentions, define what it means to deliver the project. Now that sounds simple, but it's counterintuitive because it's not necessarily about sticking rigidly to that original contract. Client goals, their expectations, they often evolve along the way. Success might mean delivering something quite different from the initial plan, but if it actually solves their current problem, well, that's the win.
Ah, okay. So flexibility is key. Understanding the real, maybe unspoken need, not just ticking off the original list.
Exactly. I actually remember a project where the client initially wanted this huge, complex AI system. Sounded great on paper, but 6 months in, we realized what they really needed, like right now, was just a simple script, something to automate one specific painful reporting task. Delivering that small practical thing, even though it wasn't the grand vision, it basically saved the whole relationship and built massive trust. It wasn't the contract, but it was value.
That makes perfect sense.
It's about real value versus contractual obligations sometimes. What about focusing on progress? How does that fit in?
Right, that's another crucial rule. Focus on progress and be pragmatic. It sounds obvious, but in these pressure cooker situations, it's easy to get stuck. This means you have to prioritize just moving forward, finding any solution, rather than getting bogged down in, pointless arguments or trying to prove who was right. Debating past mistakes just burns time and goodwill, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So Dabrowski suggests asking, what's the smallest, most useful thing we can deliver today? Just to show movement, build a bit of confidence, sometimes even a partial solution or like a quick prototype can break a deadlock.
So shifting focus from blame games to just taking action, even small steps.
Got it. And you mentioned the client relationship earlier, too.
Yes, absolutely critical. And this might be the most strategic rule. Focus on the long-term relationship with the client. This means seeing the current difficult, maybe impossible project as just one stage in a much longer potential partnership. It's about building trust, showing adaptability, really trying to cultivate a partnership attitude, even when things are tough.
So sometimes you might need to, absorb a small hit now for the bigger picture later.
Exactly. Maybe you go the extra mile, or you don't fight every single tiny battle over scope, because that long-term trust and relationship is actually more valuable than winning every point on this specific project. It builds foundation, so even when things inevitably go wrong, you're seen as part of the solution, not part of the problem. Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this really mean for you, the listener? I think it's about realizing that navigating these super complex, high-stakes projects isn't always about following the rulebook precisely. It's often more about, well, adapting, building that trust, and, yeah, sometimes choosing pragmatic action over just rigidly sticking to the theory.
Absolutely. This deep dive really highlights that even projects that look completely impossible, the ones truly doomed to fail, they can be turned around. But it requires the right approach, the right mindset, focusing on value, on progress, and definitely on the relationship.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to consider. What impossible project in your own life, maybe at work, maybe personal, could actually benefit from a dose of this pragmatic, relationship-first kind of thinking? Even if it means totally rewriting your own internal rulebook.